Again, I'll say it again. So we're going to go a summary. I'm going to do a summary from chapters Ayin Beis, Hemshech Ayin Beis, volume 1. We stopped last class. We stopped in the summary of chapter 275, Reisha and Hey. So I'm just going to summarize the flow. And last week I did a more central summary of the whole interface. But essentially the bottom line is, how do you take this yesh, this ego, the untamed, self-absorbed, narcissistic existence, and we don't need to prove that that's the case, right? And turn it into something, without annihilating it, turning it into something that is more refined, a keli, a container to elikus, which is the opposite, bittul. Like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that anything that is kedusha means it's bottle. Simple English is very simple. Is it about you, or is it about more than you? If it's all about you, ultimately, when you compete with something that's not you, you're going to prevail, which is the root of all evil, essentially. If you have a little room for something beyond you, you have the capacity to love, you have the capacity to give, you have the capacity to be noble, you have the capacity to coexist, etc., etc. So in the language of Chassidus, it's Teyu, the world of Teyu, the world of Tikkun. Tikkun is a world of bittul, where there's an existence like ours, but everything tolerates everything else, and more importantly, everything works with one another. You give and take, until the point they become like one. So essentially this interface of how you connect this yesh, and how it becomes, how it's trained and educated to connect to retrace its steps to the divine, is the gist of Ayin Beis in many ways. So it begins with Keser. The whole Hemshech begins with Keser. Keser is the crown. Keser, as he says, the mumutza. God has to, so if you really think of the interface, it goes two ways. There's the interface, how it goes from God to us, and how from us back to God. So God to us is that he had a will, a desire to create. Without that will, that's the first. But the beginning of the whole Hemshech starts with that premise. After the explains what Keser is, explain what is it? It's God's will, and will is the first interface between anything. If you don't want something, there's no connection between you and the object. That's it. So the first thing begins with a desire or will that is manifests what the essence wants. In this case, God wants existence. So the will becomes the first interface, which of course will evolve into many other levels, into the existence as we know it. And when we retrace the steps, the same thing is, from our existence we want to connect to that will, which connects us back to the essence. But, as we learned, the will itself is much more reflective of the divine than it is of us. So it cannot really be an interface. So Chachma, wisdom, is where the will becomes wisdom, which was such a key component that God's desire turned into a structure. You see, because we're made of structure, we're made of details. So we can't just jump into the will without disappearing, without being annihilated. So the will transforms. If you remember, he said wisdom is not really wisdom. Wisdom is just a desire, a tainug, that wants to build a house. So it basically compels a wisdom, some type of logic to it. But the logic is essentially coming from a place that's beyond logic. Or in the words that we learned recently, is that Chachma, wisdom, its main thing is bittul. Its main thing is that it's selfless, and it's it's a tool for the divine, basically an instrument. So you could say Chachma is the first structured instrument, on our terms, where the divine manifests in existence, and that's why it's the linchpin to get back. So when we have wisdom, and we use our wisdom to understand the divine wisdom, that's the place where we meet. And that brings us back to the will. But you can't get to the will without the wisdom, it won't make sense. In other words, if we had no intelligence, if there was no intelligence, it would simply be, God wants it this way, and either you choose to listen to him more like a slave, a servant, or you don't. The wisdom allows us to integrate it and assimilate it. So, of course, wisdom is Chachma Koyach Ma, Shema. So its essential entity is koyach. It's a faculty, but it's ma. It's a faculty that's bottom. That's the key thing here. Whereas in Ratzon and Keser, it'll just be, so to speak, ayin, just ayin. There's no there's no substance. Chacham at least has some beginning, some semblance of structure. So in chapters 275, or in all these chapters, what he's been doing is been discussing with the Shem Ma'az rooted. There's the Shem Ma'az rooted in Ak, so it comes from the forehead. And the contrast to Tayu is rooted in Sag, which comes from the Peh, or the Ezachet and Peh. And it has the two ways. I'm not going to go through that because I already summed that up. But he's coming to ending basically the discussion of the Metzach, of the forehead. That what we learned that it's an expression of the etzem, but it's in a form of a leap. So you have the essence, much more than you do through hearing or through understanding, but it's a leap, meaning you can't identify with it. It's not the kiruv, like he calls it. It's not the tfisa. It's not in kalim. You see something, you definitely see something far beyond you. You see something that is reflective of the etzem, but there's nothing. You can't really contain it. Whereas when you hear it, you're only hearing a reflection, not the essence of it, but you contain it. It's in kalim. So in chapter 275, basically, he's talking about how ma affects the bittul, how it affects a certain self. It humbles and creates bittul, a certain selflessness in existence. But he calls it, like he says, so how do you explain that it's a bittul pnimi at the same time? It's not hergish pnimi mamish. In other words, it's not makif. We're not talking about a makif that just, like he spoke in the last chapter to 274, that there's ak affects us in a form of makif. In earlier chapters he talked about how makif it affects. What it affects is there. It's more the awe. It's more the sense of faith and other things that exists in existence. But ma has a more primistic effect. But how does it have a primistic effect and it's not completely internal? So there he goes back to explain the difference between seeing something and understanding it. That when you see it, you're seeing something that is reflective of the essence. However, it's not really contained. You can't really say it's yours. You can't say you own it, as if you could, for example, when you understand something well. So that's Shema. And he gave the example of the difference when you learn Chumash, Teresh B'Ksav, you learn Teresh B'Al Peh. When you learn Teresh B'Ksav, you immediately see there's something beyond this all. It's completely not written like a teacher would explain something with seichel. It's written. And obviously we're assuming that there's a faith in it. But when it's written not in a way like in you learn Gemara, you learn Chassidus, it's coming to explain on our level. So you learn Chumash, nothing there is coming to explain anything. It's telling you the facts, telling you the story, and you can sense in its brevity and you can sense, he says, a higher level of elokus. So therefore, but you don't really get it. There's no hasag in Teresh B'Ksav without Teresh B'Al Peh. You can't really understand it. I mean, you can understand a verse here or there, but definitely not the elaboration. So Teresh B'Ksav, Teresh B'Al Peh is not just Teresh B'Ksav is a point, and Teresh B'Al Peh is elaborating. It's not like Mishnah and Gemara. Teresh B'Ksav takes you to another place. It's like the divine speaking. It would be like a Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu calling you in, telling you instruction from a higher place, and then you go out, you work it over with your chaverim. But it's like a divine. It's completely. You sense that it's coming from another place. So there he's giving. It's much more etzem, and therefore it creates a certain bittul. Because like hearing, like he says, it's like hearing the king himself speak. But you're not hearing this king himself. You're hearing from someone. This is what the king said. So it's definitely a certain. It evokes a certain sense of. Much more powerful than something that's explained to you, but at the same time, it's like a form of dilug, and that's where it comes from the metzach and so on. That comes from the forehead. That's an expression. Now he ties it up in the next two chapters, 276, Reish Ayin Vav, Reish Ayin Zayin. This is like the conclusion of the concept of ma and sag. So to explain it, it goes to another. Seemingly goes back. And I think chapter 2, Reish Ayin Vav, is a fundamental one. Like, there's those chapters that jump out. This is the one about Atzmus. Yeah. So essentially, in brief, basically, like this. And this is like real Chassidus.
Yeah.
This is not Kabbalah. This is where Chassidus Chabad comes in full glory. And also, of all Chassidus Chabad, the Rebbe Rashab. You see, this type of language you're not going to find in Tzemach Tzedek. Or the Alter Rebbe, you'll find some Alter Rebbe lines, but not such an elaboration. So essentially he goes back and ties the whole picture. Remember, the whole Shema began the discussion in Reish Samach Ches, I believe, right? The Reish Samach Gimel, 263. It says, Kol inyan hatikun, the tikkun in two levels, that the energies, the can tolerate one another, and that the kelim can join and scholars give and take and become one. All of that comes from the Shema, and that's where it began the whole discussion. What Shema is. Shema Chodesh, where is it rooted? The forehead versus Sag, which is rooted only in the mouth, and so on. The difference between Riyah and Shmiya, the difference between the forehead and speech, and so on. So now he's tying it all together. Remember there, the whole point is the tikkun of the energy, the tikkun of the kelim. Right? So he said basically that the difference is that the Eris, tikkun, what tikkun does to tell you is, it weakens the energy, so there's tolerance. And tell you it's just me, and I'm just expressing myself. So there's no room for anyone else, as he elaborated at length. What happens in tikkun? That intensity is not strong. So therefore, there's now room. We gave it a good example in any mediation, in any type of, where there's a disagreement between two entities. So what do you have in a disagreement? The first problem is, and I can speak from personal experience, counseling people. The first problem is that you have two entities that don't talk to each other. And they don't tolerate each other. They yell, can't have communication. Why do you need a third party to mediate? I'm just using it as an example. Why do you need a third party to mediate? Because the two can't communicate on their own. There are two people who are, let's say, even disagree. At least there's an element of, say we disagree, but now let's sit down and let's air it out. You can't do that, so the third party can come and say, okay, the first thing is, before we go further, we have to stop screaming. If you think you're 100% right, you think you're 100% right, we're going nowhere. You might as well just give up on this whole arrangement. God forbid. So the first thing is tolerance. We're not even talking about respect or appreciating or complimenting each other. Tolerance. So the first thing Tikkun does to tell you is, let's quiet down these energies that are just intense. I mean, it's a real-time application. We all have examples of this in our lives. So the first thing is, let's just, 1 second. There's no such thing as anyone being 100% right. We're here because there's a greater purpose. And the truth is, sometimes the two parties, what their real goal is that the mediator should help them win, basically. I'll show you how my side is right. And a good mediator knows that, and basically says, you know what, let them both think that. And meanwhile, I'll figure out a way to do this. So the first thing is, okay, let me hear you both speak. So you see, the first thing is, this one speaks for 5 minutes, this one speaks for 5 minutes. What you're doing is creating, even though in their mind they're still at war, but you already created a certain intensity isn't there anymore. It isn't just yelling and screaming. So that's the first thing Tikkun has to do. Now remember, we're talking here, the yelling and screaming, not necessarily klippa or evil. It's toyu. It's a world of Kedusha. But it's a world of Kedusha where every entity, like Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, they had no respect for each other because each one was so sure, so convinced that he's right. That's it. But that cannot create any there's no tikkun there. That's toyu, that's chaos. And it will ultimately cause destruction, no matter what the intention of each individual is. So you're talking even in Kedusha, we're not let alone that in most disagreements, as we know, it's not necessarily coming from pure Kedusha. There's ego, there's other things, and so on. So the first thing Tikkun Don has to quiet down the energy. And the second thing it does, I'm just summing up because then this is relevant to this chapter. The second thing is, now the Kalim come into play. If you quiet down the energy, you still don't have cooperation. You don't have complementation. So the next thing is getting these Eidos to come into Kalim. And not only come into Kalim, but that the Kalim should, the Eidos and Kalim, the energy in the containers, should respect and need and appreciate each other. So there's a whole discussion back in the beginning of all the levels. Remember, we're talking about sublimating the yesh. All the levels of how that happens, stage by stage by stage by stage. And basically, it comes to the point, ultimate hitkalilut is not just that they tolerate each other, not just that they communicate with each other, but they ultimately come, as he says, bli yeshayim tzereish v'seif, like the human body, where everything, the heart, the mind, the liver, the organs, the eyes, the ears, all the cells, are impossible to see themselves without the other. So it's not just coexistence and tolerance. You're talking about a symbiosis, as we spoke, a complement, where the whole thing becomes like one entity, one reality that is made up of many, many parts. But essentially, they all have now come and joined together. So that's the Iskalus, the ultimate Iskalus. So now, here's the Chiddush here. I have not found this yet in any sources, so I think this is completely from the Rebbe Rashab, but he says Yesh Leimer. If I recall, Yesh Leimer. He says, Yesh Leimer, this is Iskalus, this is a major Chiddush, you'll see in a moment why. He says, Yesh Leimer, that this is Iskalus, and we're speaking specifically Eris and Kalim, not just tolerance. It comes from Atzmus itself. Chapter 276, page 560. So comes from Atzmus itself.
The first time it says that?
Yeah, Yesh Leimer. He says Yesh Leimer. This Galzation begins Atzmus and say. If he says Yesh Leimer, it means it's not before. So it comes from Atzmus itself, and not Atzmus Shema, as we'll soon see. This is an explanation to Atzmus Shema. But here's where it all comes together. This chapter is like mamish, a connector between the whole sugi here. Why Atzmus? So in a beautiful explanation, again, I think it's the only place I ever saw it so specifically. He says like this, because Atzmus, its nature, or I don't say the word nature, but its being is such that it is ultimate unity. Like let's see the Lashon here. It says kavyachol, because you can't even say that. Neisa hakel means it contains everything.
Bears everything.
Bears, contains, and everything. Neisa hakel, which really means not because it is a sum and totality of all parts, but because it's ultimate reality, and ultimate reality just has everything in it. Everything. And again, it's important because we don't think in terms of that type of everything. By us, everything means all the things we see. The total of it is everything, like the sum total of something. So it's maybe billions of parts, but it's still that's not. We're talking about everything that's before parts, that precedes any details. So it's neisa hakel kavyachol, v'akol b'chinas agdus pshuta mamash, and that's the second side of it. That it's all one there. It's completely oneness there. Agdus pshuta. When you say pshuta, you mean pashut means something that is sometimes can be defined as seamless. Pashut. When something doesn't have any shape or form or any definition, you say that's pashut. So pashut does not mean simple as in simplicity. We say, Baal Shem Tov says, the pshittus of a ish pasha touches the pshittus of Atzmus. The simplicity, innocence of a simple person, meaning he's not complex and not all caught up with his personality and all his giluyim, all his revelations, his tzir. So he's a keli for pshittus Atzmus, which means for the simplicity of the essence. But what's simplicity? Simplicity doesn't mean simple as not in complex. It means simple as in not diverse. Not multi-faceted. It's a oneness. It's a unity. When the Rebbe told Herbert Wiener, from 9.5 Mystics, he says, I look at the Bochrim's eyes and I see they're naive. The Rebbe says it's not naive. They don't have a split in their lives. They don't have two worlds. They have no dichotomy. In other words, the naivete of a child you can see as being simple and immature, but you could also see it as being no duplicity. There's no duality. You only have one reality, which really is what Achdus Hashem is. Eidin Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum radiates that, but he's talking here even higher than that, because Atzmus means that as the root of it all. So, and then he goes on and says, I'm just defining it here, because so here he goes now, explains that the real, when you say Ein Sof, something has no end, there's two ways you can interpret it. It means no end, so it's bli gvul compared to gvul. So one thing is infinite and one thing is finite. But that's not real Ein Sof. Because when you say something is bli gvul and not gvul, that itself is a gvul. That's a definition. Remember here the definition then of bli gvul, the real bli gvul means that it can't say it's this and not that. That's the key. See, we think in terms of bli gvul and gvul usually, it's infinite as versus finite. But when you say that real bli gvul means that there's no such thing as this and not, as soon as you say something is this and not that, that's already a limitation. Even if the this is an infinite this.
But this is not a chiddush with Rabbi Rashab.
The chiddush that this is the root of Iskalus. That's the chiddush here. Yeah. That Atzmus is that way. Of course, it's not the chiddush. That the explanation that the Yesh Leimer is going that the Iskalus that we find that tikkun is able to have a unity, even though it's details. like we'll soon say, the two opposites of ma, that's the chiddush here. He says it clearly. He says, Yeshna. I'll soon show you how he spells it out. That's a chiddush at the end of the chapter here. We'll get there in a minute. Now, so to explain it, he explained what Atzmus is. So Atzmus has, so far we talked about Atzmus as being Neisa Hakel, Achdus Apshuta, and now he explains, and this is what it says elsewhere. It says, that the real Ein Seif, Shaykh Rak Ba'atzmus, the Pirush Ein Seif is Shlilus Kol Hagdara. That's how we tie Ein Seif, not as in, you see, for example, Chassidus asked the question, why does it say Ein Sof, not Ein Leitchila? That Ein Seif is Ein Seif. That's not what he's talking about here. There it's Ein Sof, it has no end, but it has a beginning, because the beginning is Atzmus, the source of the light. So that's an Ein Seif, that's so-called, I call it relative, but it is Ein Seif, but it has a beginning. Like one example I once heard was, imagine a pole that's infinitely tall, and it casts an infinite shadow. So the shadow is Ein Seif, but you can't call it Ein Leitchila. It's coming from the pole. It has a source. So that means the same example is with light. If so-called the source is the light is reflecting the source and it's infinite, so that's Ein Seif. But what he's touching Ein Seif is Shlilus Kol Hagdara is Hagdara Sheiyeh. Ein Seif not as in has no end, and as opposed to something that does have an end, because then Ein Seif means it defies all definition, any type of definition, even the definition of Bli Gvul itself, even the definition that it has no definition. So you can't even say it has no definition, because that too would limit it. That's why he calls it Shlilus HaShlila, Shlilus HaChiv. You have to say it has no definition, but it has no definition, and it can't be defined by either. It has both, and it has all that. Gam Geder HaBli Gvul. It's not shayla even the Geder of Bli Gvul. V'hu Shlilus HaChiv, v'Shlilus HaShlila, Shlilus HaGvul, v'Shlilus HaBli Gvul. It's Shlilus HaChiv, you can't say it's this. Shlilus HaShlila, you can't say it's not this. So you can't say it's this, you can't say it's not this, you can't say it's not this. That's now, sometimes people hear this the first time, it sounds completely irrational. What does that mean? We don't, but if you think about it, it's not, because we're so seduced, we're so programmed by our existence that everything is defined. If Dr. Lang was here, he would say it's not a problem, that's reality. Quantum reality is quantum reality. You got a problem with definition. But I'm just saying, you have to say, but the truth is that when you really think about it and you sense not yourself, talk about this alone is already an exercise in bittul. If you don't think about yourself and you really think about a bigger picture, reality, this makes much more sense. Reality should not be defined. Reality is reality. The fact that something is something and not something else, by definition, it already means it's not total emes. Because if it was emes, it would be through and through, everywhere, in every possible way. I mean, there are many explanations to explain this, but this is the fun. And some of also in Vayelech he uses the same language. So I don't know. This needs the researchers will research it. I don't know if this lashon Shlilus is before the Rebbe Rashab. Some of it's in here. I don't know if it's maybe there's some, but I don't recall seeing exactly that language.
Even what is it? Avedus HaKedesh. Who is the mocker?
Yeah, but he doesn't say this. He doesn't say. But
what's the difference?
Let's put it this way: if he didn't have this, you could explain that. He says, "Ein Seif Shleimus de Ein Seif is Shem sheyesh lekech v'bilti bagvul yesh lekech b'gvul." He doesn't discuss so much bilti mitzias nimtza. Remember these ideas are not created by Chassidus.
By the way, where's the mock of bilti mitzias nimtza?
That's from Meir Nevuchim.
Oh, yes. Remember I said the Rambam?
Yeah, the Rambam. He doesn't say the lashon mitzias bilti mitzias. In Yonash Alteios Chassidus, he has a hod about it. He doesn't say the lashon mitzias bilti mitzias nimtza.
Where's the key man? We'll get it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Look in Yonash Alteios Chassidus. The Losh Mitzias built to Mitzias Nimtza Mamish doesn't say an Am, but he says the Teichen of it. Basically, a non-existential.
No,
No, Meir Nevuchim. And Chassidus, of course, makes it a big thing. The truth is, again, it's in the Rebbe Rashab primarily and the Frierdiker Rebbe. Talk about it more than all the others before. The Alter Rebbe speaks, you see, in Atzmus there are three main expressions usually here. Mechuyev HaMitzias, built to Mitzias Nimtza, and what's the third lashon? And amitis hametzias. And those three things are different things. I remember we once wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said you're mixing three ganzen andere sugis. Because usually you just dump them. Oh no, I'm sorry, not amitis mitzias. Mitziusim atzmusei. They're all essentially only unique to Atzmus. In Tanya, he's the first place you see Mitzusim Atzmusi, in the Gersa Kedesh Simachov, which he cites here. That's the first place. In the Kutei Deburim says that when the Alter Rebbe wrote a Gersa Kedesh Simachov and the Chassidim first saw it, it's a Kul Negas. They went crazy. Because we read it, you don't see it as much until the Rabbi make a whole fuss of it. Because basically with the Chiddush there, and Tzemach he said clearly, Bezeh Chiddush Rabbeinu Nish Meseiden. So there's a Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe 100%. Yeah. He says basically the Chiddush of Eir. And that is that there's something that can carry Koyach Atzmus into existence. And that's Eir. That's a Chiddush from the Alter Rebbe. No one said that before. So God is built to Mitzias Nimtza. That the Rambam and others. Again, not necessarily the level the way, because Chassidus go. Remember, you can't appreciate Bilt Mitzvahs until you go through the whole Seder Shtalshus to the beginning and first see. Someone says, "I'm already in Atzmus." What do you know before you tell me what's not Atzmus before you tell me what Atzmus is? Like the Rebbe once said to somebody, Purim, he got drunk. He said, the Rebbe said, first you have to have Yoda before you get to Adla Yoda. You know. You can't just jump to Shtuz the Kedusha if you have no Kedusha. You know, you have to have a... So the concept that God is beyond everything, obviously that's the foundation of the Ikrim says it, the Rambam knows. The question, however, that Kabbalah struggles with, can you have a relationship with a God that's beyond? We talked about that. That's also part of the interface question. Because that's the machlokes of the Mekabalim, whether Kesser is safe or not. You know, that way he speaks about in Samach Vav, Vayelach. And the question, therefore, is there's two shittas. One approach is you can have a relationship with Etzem, no problem, but you can't be you. I'm just summing it up. You have to get out of yourself. Which means existence can't really connect to non-existential existence. The other opinion is, no problem, you can have a connection with God, but it's not the essence of God. That to have the best of both worlds, the essence mamish, connected to existence, the Alter Rebbe resolved that with Eir. Because Eir is completely bottle. As the Rebbe once said, bittel kenish bottle werden. Since it's completely bittel, so it's bottle even to the Mitzias, built in Mitzias Nimtza of Atzmus, so therefore it carries that built in Mitzias Nimtza. So bittel is the key secret. If there was no bittel, you would know. But bittel, as he's explaining here, not the bittel of Torah, the bittel of Tikkun, is a bittel at you are bottle, not a bittel annihilation. That existence, because Eir is defined. Eir is Hagdara. But he's saying Atzmus is no Hagdara. Eir is Hagdara. And that's its Maila. Now he's not talking about that right now. I'm just saying that's the Chiddush in the Gersa Kedesh. So that's Mitzvus. So there he says two things in the Gersa Kedesh. That two things. I just talked about one Chiddush. The main thing there he says is that the Yesh that feels it has no source. This is also Chiddush Nifla. The Yesh, we feel we have no source. Even though our logic tells us that we have parents. Our logic tells us that their parents had parents. Our logic tells us that something had to put them here. Still, what's your hergish? You feel you're a branch of a tree? You feel you're an extension of something? No. You feel you're self-contained, self-created. You don't feel you're even going to die. You don't feel like I have a beginning and an end. Your logic tells you that. You feel right now, I have no reason why I'm not going to be here forever. The Chassidus talks about it. So where does this hergish come from? That a person should feel that they have no source when they actually do have. So till the Alter Rebbe, the argument, this feeling was considered the root of all problems. And we have to break you to realize you have a God, you have a source. You're not self-made man. You're not self-made. It comes from Keich of Hashem. The Alter Rebbe was mechadish. The fact that you have such a feeling means it comes from somewhere. That is kedusha. Because God, only the Yesh Hamiti, who has no source, can give you the feeling that you have no source, that you come from there. However, in our case, we are not feeling a source. It can manifest in a negative way. That's what he says in the Gersa Kedesh. So, the only one who's mitzusim atzmusei is the essence. Even Eir, the highest levels, has a source. So Eir could not give us a feeling of no source because Eir itself feels that it has a source. So where does the fact that we feel we have no source come from? It comes from God that has no source. That's mitzusim atzmusei. Then there's mechuyev hamitzias, which means it's an existence that has to be. Everything, this table does not have to be. You and I don't have to be. It's a pure logic. You could have 1,000,000 trees in the forest. If one tree was missing, it's not like everything is going to stop. Mechuyev Metzias means it's an existence that has to be. It's a postulate perhaps from Metzias Atzmus, but it's a second idea. And Metzias built in Metzias Nimtza, my understanding, and I always heard it was, it's the highest way of really understanding the divine. Because Metzias Atzmus is obviously unique. They're all unique to Atzmus. But Metzias built in Metzias Nimtza is essentially saying that he exists, but not in an existential way of existence, which means we only call him existence because we have no other words to use. Because we can't say he doesn't exist. But to say he exists like we exist, no. So basically, all the rules of existence as we know don't apply there. So it's a mitzias, but it's mitzias built in mitzias nimtza. It exists in a non-existential way. The Rebbe Rashab once said, heard this from Rabbi, that the Apocratus, the atheist, who says, I don't believe that God exists, in one way is closer to the truth than those that say God does exist. Because when we say God exists, we mean like we exist. God also exists, or he's a greater existence. When he says he doesn't exist, it's really more true, because he doesn't exist what we call existence. In other words, that fact that they can say God doesn't exist, the fact that God, who created it all, can create human beings that can say he doesn't exist, means he's a different type of existence. Nothing's like that. A piece of art dictates that there's an artist. No one denies that. And here's an existence that can deny that something put it here. That alone tells you that it doesn't exist like we exist, and that's why you can say it doesn't exist, in that sense. So, anyway, Metzias Mitzvah, he uses this term here. Mm-hmm. It's critical because you see, it's the only type of entity that paradox has no problem for. That's why this is so relevant. So that's why Bli Gvul here means it doesn't have any Hagdara at all. Nothing. No definition. It's not this, not that. I just want to point out something that is not really mamish what he says here, but it's, I think, critical. Because I know this actually, I find in classes, explaining this idea even to secular people is the easiest. It's much harder to explain Shem Ma'achodesh and Shem Sag, even to us. And I'll tell you why. Because in Tovshin Zayin, in Tiku and the field of Maimorim, the Friedrich Rebbe elaborates on Bilt Mitzias Nimtza, Tzadik Dal. There's a few places the Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe adds a lot to this. Someone asked last time, what is the addition of the Friedrich Rebbe to the Rebbe Rashab? In this sugya, a built Mitzias Nimtza, is Poshet Ganze Maimorim for Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe that elaborates in very powerful ways. In Tzadik Dal, Tovshin Zayin, a few other places, those two places. What the Friedrich Rebbe basically says, which is, I think, fascinating.
What Maimorim on Tzadik Dal?
The whole Hemshech is about this. It's not that many Maimorim, because he stopped in the middle. There's 11 Maimorim, I think, 12 Maimorim. There's a place where he speaks about Ruchnius, but more Tovshin Vav, Tovshin Zayin is the main place. Tiku, Tovshin Zayin, and the Pesach Maimorim, Matzazur, I think. So he says essentially, this is, I think, a very critical point, because the first question he asks is, if something that's so beyond us, how can we even talk about it? Is this the only way we know about this is because the Rabbi told us? Would we ever, in other words, intuit this on our own? I mean, it doesn't mean we have to. You could say a lot of things. The Torah tells us that's the way it is. But the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, brings that we have examples of this in our existence, and that's where we can sense its truth. So I just want to mention one or two things. First of all, what I said before, that each of us feels we're self-made. As bad as that can be, the root of it is a sense of, because God wanted us to have a sense of Atzmus. There's no creature or an existence, no malach, no ilm that has that feeling. Atzilus absolutely feels it comes from the source. Oyed? All the ilm is that their whole role, malachim. It is only a neshama beguf in this world that has the feeling of yesh, the yesh, that it's only ilah v'siba shekad milei. So that's one feeling. Another example that he gives, the Rebbe about Bilt Mitzias Nimtza, is a very interesting one. And you think about it, it's like simple but brilliant. Like, let's just use an example. Like right now, till I'm going to say the next line, what is your left leg doing? So you didn't think about it, but it was there, it existed, but you didn't sense it because you didn't have to concentrate. Now you think about it. My left leg, it's on the floor, it's touching, whatever. In other words, what does life feel like? Someone said to you, tell me, what does it feel like to be alive? The answer is, as soon as you start describing what it feels like, you need a doctor. Right? Health shouldn't feel like anything. If you feel something, if you feel a dull sensation, a sharp sensation, a block. If your breathing is not smooth, you feel something, that's not a good sign. When you really think about health doesn't feel like anything. It just like flows. And there's no sensation even. So he brings there an example. That's an example that existence means you don't have to sense that it's there. As a matter of fact, sensing something is already a sign that it's, now I'm experiencing it. Really being in the moment is he calls it a built-in mitzvah. It's like existing but not existing as we exist. So when we define existence is all by definition. What's a table? A table is a thing with legs and it's in a room and it has a size and a shape. We use it for this. Someone say a table just exists in a non-existential way. It doesn't make any sense. But we have a sense of it in our own lives that if someone says, "Are you here?" Yes. Can you prove that you're here? You can't prove it. I just know I'm here. What does that mean? There's only you can say that. You cannot say it about me. You can say it about me because since I look like you, so it means I must have sensations like you do. So you conclude that I feel the same way. But only you feel yourself in that type of non-sensational way. I'm just giving you examples that these ideas we have when you really apply yourself, you find examples, especially when you start focusing on yourself. Right away, there's another way of experiencing things. I mean, what I say now is, by the way, anyone that studied any Far Eastern stuff, so right away says, "Where'd you get this from? This is Buddhism." Whenever they say that, no, this is Judaism. Where'd you get it from? But
from Ktura.
Right, exactly. We have, or from the monkeys of before the Mabul, whatever. Now, the point I'm trying to say is that, unfortunately, no one knows this is Yiddishkeit. This is pure Chassidus. Now, if you go look in the source of Chassidus, you start looking in the Zohar, you see those little shenas, then you start saying, that's what he means. When you say, for example, in Tikkun is what we say in Pasuk Chaliyo, Les machshavet tfisa beklal, ilin, and lav ilin midas ihu. What does it mean? So when you read it, okay, he has no midas. God doesn't have emotions. It means God has no definitions. Doesn't experience as we experience. And then what's most beautiful, of course, is that we can connect with it. It's not just trying to say God is beyond us and we're just inferior little creatures. The opposite. That God, we were created in that image, and therefore we have a sense of Atzmus within us. So, I think this is vital to understand this chapter, because that's really what he's coming down. Because this chapter is like he's taking the whole thing, he just finished this whole Kabbalah, Ma'asag, and like going straight to Atzmus. So clearly, as he's going to say, the Atzmus of Shem Ma is a reflection of the Atzmus he's describing here. This is where, I guess, Eitz Chaim is a bir Chassidus. Because you think he's explaining Eitz Chaim about Metzach and this. For Ketzach Nishtan, Metzach and this is just a reflection of Atzmus, which is explained in Chassidus. So Kabbalah is a bir Chassidus. Yeah, because that's in a lower level. Ak is already how it manifests in Seder Shtalshlus. But where's the etzem come from, this type of thing? In other words, what he's saying, how is it possible that we can have a reflection of the essence through a Metzach, and it's still not part of who you are, is because Atzmus gave that power to be able to penetrate existence, and it's still not you until you work on it. Okay, so I'm just reading this, I'm reading a little more of this chapter here. This thing, that remember, Ein Sof is teaching now, Shlius Kol Hagdara, every Hagdara, even the Hagdara, even the definition of Bligvul. This is only possible, this idea that it's Shlius Achiv, that you can't say it's this, and you can't say it's not this, Shlius Ashlila, because in Chakira you have Yidiyas Achiv, Yidiyas Ashlila. Yidiyas Achiv meaning, say, you're a Chacham, okay. By God you say Chacham v'lei b'Chacham Yidiyah, Yidiyas Ashlila. You can't say God's a Chacham, say God is not a Chacham. But mainly he has Chachma, but not like we have Chachma. He's not defined by it. But he's saying here, Shlilas HaShlila also. It's also Shlilas Yidiyas HaShlila. You can't say he's not that. He's not that. You can't say he's not that. And so on. The Zeshab comes out. Tehine ha'eir v'agili min ha'atzmus hu b'chinas bli gvul. Eir and gili from Atzmus is a geder. It's already a reflection. It's a manifestation. So Atzmus basically no sense of existence as we know it. Eir is far beyond us, but Eir is already a defined existence. Use the word defined existence. I find that to be a very good defined and undefined. defined. It's Eir, it's not Cheshech, and so on. So Eir is already a Gili. That's what means Eir and Gili min Atzmus. It's already a defined entity. It's a different definition of Bligvul. It's Bligvul, but that means it's not Gvul. It's not Gvul. That's a Bligvul that shale is something. It's not, before he said the Shlil is called Hagdara. Here it's Shlilus Hagvul. So there's a Bligvul that's called Shlilus Hagvul, Bligvul as opposed to Gvul. There's a Bligvul that's Shlilus of any definition. It's a different meaning completely. Ubezeh Pirush Ein Sof Hu Bligvul. And in this case, you say Eid Ein Sof, you mean it's Bligvul. Ubezeh Pirush Ein Sof Hu Bligvul. Ein Sof literally doesn't have an end. So it's Eid Ein Sof. Eid has no end, as opposed to something that does have an end. That's the lower definition, or lower the definition on the level of Eid. The Liyah Shein Hagbol B'Eid had is a b'chinas Hagbol of Agdara Mamish. Because why is it mushal from Akbala? Why is Eir not Akbala? Because as soon as you say something has as a limit, it's Akbala of Agdara Mamish. So you're basically saying is that Eir does not have this Akbala Agdara. Is that what he's saying here? And so mushal mean Akbala. The liyashin Akbala Eir is because Akbala Agdara Mamish. Yeah. So now he's going to just bavarn in the parentheses. Ime yesha einze kamei akbol b'chinas mitzias dover kamei hakelim. Even though this is not akbol like kelim is actually a defined structure. B'kol mokum has b'chinas agdoro kamei geder hachachma v'geder hachesed. That means it's chochmah, it's chesed. Even in the highest levels, where chochmah is not chochmah at all, in other words, even in the most subtle forms, he's still saying it's this and not that. So yes, you can't call it chochmah because it's so amorphous. It's like in the seed, but you can't call it chesed. You know. So in other words, somewhere it has some
mocker for chochmah, not a mocker for chesed.
Right. V'abligvul hu shemushlam agdara. Right. Yeah. Shemushlam means not well. V'abligvul hu shemushlam agdara v'alkeinu b'chinas pshitus l'gam yishem b'chinas agvul klal. No. This is not Bligvul Amiti. No. This is still the Bligvul of Eir. Sorry. He wanted to say like this. One second. Yeah. Sure. It goes like this. Yeah. He's explaining why is Eir Sheil the Inyan of Gvul. Because, in other words, the Bligvul of Eir. Because Bligvul means that it has no Gvul at all. Because anything that's a Gvul is already a true defined state. Defined as in a tzir now. We're talking about defined as in gvul, not defined as defined. So he's saying even though you could argue, you know what, Eir does should have it because in the highest levels, Chachma is not Chachma, but it's still Chachma is not Chesed. So therefore, this Eir, the Bligvul of Eir, is Sheil, even the Chachma in its highest root. That's what it means, that Eir is Bligvul. It's not Gvul. Eir Gvul would mean Chachma, bin Adas, and so on. Chesed. This Bligvul hu shemushlam hagdor malkein ein hu b'chinas pshitus l'gam she'en b'chinas hagvul klal. He has no gvul. Aval ein zeh shleimus. But this is not the perfect. This is, I think we discussed. Remember we said about the set of numbers. You could say something is infinite set of numbers. So even though it's infinite compared to infinite numbers, and all numbers are equal distant. No finite numbers can reach infinity, but they're still numbers. There's still numbers. There's still something. So therefore, the infinite numbers absolutely are not finite. But if you come to a place that numbers don't matter even, you can say something is beyond infinite even numbers, then that has a whole different the experience. So there, even the finite and infinite are equally distant. So he says, but you can't call this shlemus, you can't call this perfection because it's missing Hagbola. So Eir HaBligvul is great in context. In other words, many people, spiritualists, would say, if I reach Eir HaBligvul, that's my end of the journey. And here he says, no, that's not at all. They're not even close. Because remember, in the context of Atzmus, Eir HaBligvul and Eir HaGvul are equal. That's how far it is. So it's not like Eir HaBligvul is closer because Eir HaBligvul, bottom line is, it cannot tolerate anything that's limited and finite. Because that's what it is. It's Bligvul.
Why is it limited?
That's not
being
shlemus.
Bligvul? Why do you say that's together? It's limited. No, that's why.
That's why it's limited. Exactly what you just said is the same thing. It means that. That's together. It means that it's limited. That it's defined by that. However, the shlemus of Atzmus, Shnei says hakel. He goes back to that language. Contains everything. And everything in it is chas v'sholom, God forbid, is not a mitzias there. Like in general.
Why is it chas v'sholom if it's a mitzvah? Why if the what comes out of it is there as a mitzvah, chas v'sholom? So what?
It's not
Then there's something else besides Atzmus. But he's not a hakel.
No. I'll tell you why. It's a very good question, and it goes back to the nature of Atzmus. If Atzmus has mitzias in it, then you're talking it's back to where we are.
That there's some duality.
Yeah, exactly.
But
What is duality?
yeah. Well, so
What
what?
about double existence? What's duality?
There's something else besides Atzmus, chas v'sholom. But we say it's not a hakel.
But it's he that carries it.
Okay, now he's asking a question. If we're saying that there's no definition at all, so why is there a definition that he has no mitzias inside of him? Why doesn't he have a mitzias like us inside of him? That's what you're asking. It's a similar question when they ask, can God create a storm larger, bigger than he can?
Okay.
No, but there's, I think, the way I would answer it would be, you have to remember, existence, this isn't mitzias. This mitzias is within him also. But it's not the way we understand mitzias, because as soon as you say mitzias, you're really saying is that he's made up of parts. That's what it means. So within him, within Atzmus, there's you have a Teira Shalom here? Not Teira Shalom? Okay. Kevin would right away be picking it up on his... The way I would put it is as follows. We know that Breishis Bara Lakim Shemaim V'Sa'aretz, so existence as we know it exists. It's not an illusion. This is a reality. There is a heaven and an earth and a sun and a moon. However, what we would say is that it's not all of existence. There's much more. So, and it goes in several levels. You say, which means God is nature, but nature is not God. So you say God is within all of existence, and then is beyond. When you get into the Atzmus level, the way he is on his own, how does he see this mitzias? So in Teira Shalom he says interesting thing. He says like this. He says, "This is fran, aber es ist nicht fran, es ist nicht fran." In other words, that's what he means here. It means essentially it means the Asad Lave, when Mashiach will come, existence is not going to disappear. Reality is not going to disappear as we know it. It'll be permeated in maybe ways we cannot conceive of right now, that we will sense Mitzias built in Mitzias in existence. Understand? But if you talk from the Mitzias built in Mitzias perspective, he doesn't see there's nothing in him, even though Chachma is going to come from him and Bina and Eir, but Mitzias, as we know it as Mitzias, as an entity that's defined this and not that, you're basically asking, how could something that, if it's this, if it's not, if you can't define it by this and not that, why can't you say it has a this and not that? That's what you're asking.
And you're saying lust love is going to be that way. If lust love is going to be that way, why couldn't it be like that in Atzmus?
But what's your answer?
I don't know.
No, okay. The answer is that, first of all, that's where we come into play. There is something accomplished through this.
Yeah, but you're saying it can't be chas v'shalom in Atzmus. It can be, just like it's going to be.
No, what's going to be is that the mitzvah that was outside of Atzmus, Kavyochel, the way it perceived itself outside, is going to sense what's inside Atzmus. That's what's going to be. Inside of Atzmus, it would be a contradiction of terms. He senses it right now. He doesn't need us to sense it. Because you're asking basically, can God experience something that's outside of God? Let's define it. Can God experience, as we experience existence without a God? We could experience it. But how will you live? We believe in it, you follow it, but we experience existence. I'm talking about now from our perspective, the real, not real. Can God really can God see how we see things? So I'm sure he could see it, but can he really experience it? In a way, that's probably the only ultimate limitation. I don't know if that's a limitation.
That is something that they could.
Yeah, because there's no rules. Because there's no rules.
Is something they created.
No, absolutely, because there's no rules.
Right.
For sure.
But once he created the world in that way, then we have to look at his shlemus in a certain way.
No, absolutely.
Say hello to Lang from Israel.
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, how are you?
Greetings from Israel.
So you're wiser there. So tell us, what's pshat in Atzmus, built to Metzias Nimtza? Can built to Metzias Nimtza include also Metzias?
Good answer.
Huh?
No, I only know Atzmus.
Okay, so did you feel you don't sense more of a?
Hey,
I
Luna,
do.
let
I
him
feel
listen.
more in control of myself here.
We're trying to experiment with the Avir Eretz Yisrael over the phone lines. Can we sense that extra wisdom? That's what we're trying to figure out. Or maybe the phone lines.
Go for it.
Okay,
That's the only reason I didn't want to go to Israel. I didn't want to miss this year.
it's all being recorded. The wires are actually sizzling from this discussion.
Okay, let's go.
Hey,
This is
let
good.
him
So
listen.
it's in 15, 20 minutes. I gotta go to the wedding soon. I gotta get ready and stuff.
You want to say something to the public, the web audience?
What? No.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just leaving this phone on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question is this is a very profound subject matter, and the best way I would relate to it, I mean, basically when I remember Rabbi explained, why can't we say God can create a stone he can't pick up? So the answer is because Kol Yachol doesn't mean Meshuggah. Okay? Kol Yachol doesn't. Kol It's not relevant. It's only relevant to people who are not Meshuggah. This doesn't relate to you. It says Kol Yachol does not mean Meshuggah.
Okay.
Does that clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have time to mute it
What
now.
is that machine?
Lang, hello. Doctor, put your phone on.
Why is that a machine? Why is that machine?
Okay.
He says we need a helpmate. Maybe God would want a companion.
God wants a companion. Okay, put your
Everything we do, he does.
put your phone on mute now.
Okay.
He's a
I don't
Kabbalist.
know how it is very fun.
When you reach, I remember when I reached Ben Chamishim LeEtza, so usually Ben Chamishim LeEtza, before you're Chamishim, you think Chamishim LeEtza means that when you turn 50, you start giving Eitzes. When you turn 50, you actually realize it means you start taking Eitzes. You need to be 50 to come to it.
Right.
Okay. Listen, put it on mute. Even in Israel, there's a mute. There has to be a mute. Anyway, so once again, I want to just go. Yet the Rebbe came, as he's recording many sikhs. I spoke about this once here, and developed a whole level, which also beyond that does not speak about Chassidus earlier. That Atzmus, everything we talk about is after Atzmus chose to make that logic. When you really talk on that level, there's no logic altogether. So to even say he can't create a stone, by us it's a contradiction. When that level, it's not that he could. The whole question doesn't. What kind of question? You're asking a question based on your you found yourself a nice riddle. These are our riddles. On that level, there's such riddles, no such riddles, because all logic doesn't exist. Can he? Yeah, can he? But then that itself is him. And isn't that a contradiction? By us, you see him creating a stone he can't pick up becomes a contradiction. So we these great atheists, they think, they got us, the believer. Well, who says contradictions are contradiction? On that level, it's not a contradiction. He could, he can't, he could do both, he could not be, and it's not a contradiction. The same, it's not a problem with this whole issue. So I think the way to really look at what he's saying here, I think you have to define it like this. Atzmus on Atzmus terms, without us, so to speak, without our perspective, is chaz v'shalom to say there's a mitzias, for sure. Because he is, in his essence, there's no such thing as mitzias, and so on. He's nice to everything. Bli gvul, everything. But it's not in a form of mitzias, it's Atzmus. Atzmus and mitzias is a contradiction. In our language, I'm speaking Atzmus, about Atzmus from his perspective, but how we understand it. Now, can he have a mitzias the way we understand it, and it shouldn't be a contradiction? I'm sure he could. But then we're not talking anything, that's a completely different language. In other words, even this is still how we see Atzmus. So I wouldn't call it Hagbola. Like, if you say Atzmus doesn't have Gvul, power of Gvul, that's like he says, then it's not Bli Gvul, because Bli Gvul has no Hagdara. If you say Atzmus has a Metzias, you're saying it's not Atzmus. Then you're saying Atzmus is us. And that's a problem. Now, in Inyan, you could say, why can't he be us? Why can't God manifest in a human being? Then you're basically using him against himself, so to speak. You're using him. Of course he could, because there's nothing he can't. But then you're not talking a language that we can relate to. The fact, at the end of the day, even when you speak about Atzmus with all this, there is ultimately, he is not you. So to say, unless he's like me, means he's limited. That's not a sprach you can speak. That's why it's chaz v'shalom. Because then you're basically turning it into Aved, you're turning him into you. That's what he wants to be Sheol. Not he wants to limit him, he can't have a Metzias in him. Yeah, of course in Inyan he could have a Metzias, but only Mitzvah his greatness. Chaz v'shalom is not a Metzias. You're here, don't have to dial again.
Hello?
You're connected, you don't have to be connected, you're connected already.
No, I tried to put it on speaker. I don't know how to use it. So the person's
Why do we have to have him on speaker? Put him on speaker.
No, then we won't hear
No, he will hear.
He won't hear you.
Once over there, that should.
No, we don't have to hear him, he'll hear us. Oh, only speaker makes him hear us. Yeah. Doctor, you're going to have to be quiet. We're talking, Atzmus is okay. For the web audience, this is part of, we have here an alien from outer space who's called in and is trying to understand what Atzmus is. Okay. So you understand what I'm saying? That's tell me, Yossi.
I hear you saying. No, I'm saying the Chas v'Sholem
is
over there. That's why Yom brings everything apostle to show that is a poil.
In other words, bottom line is like this: to say that could God have basically destroyed God and turned himself into a human being, and that's it? So could he have done such a thing? The whole thing doesn't make. Then you're turning God into us. Who says that? You want it to be you? The whole point is God is not us. So God, what he can do anything he wants to do. But you're turning him into Metzias, that's a chaz v'shalom, you're turning him into you. That's the problem. That's for sure not acceptable. So bottom line is, we're talking here the fact that, so the real Bli Gvul is not like the Bli Gvul of Eir, it's the Bli Gvul of Atzmus. The Bli Gvul of Atzmus is such that there's not, what is it saying here? As everything, I think it's also critical. I just want to say one final line with this. What's really the problem with Avodah Zarah? What's the problem with Avodah Zarah, ultimately? God is petty, he's jealous that a human being is going to bow to a stone or to a wood. So what? You want to be stupid? Be stupid. Why Avodah Zarah? It's a cardinal sin. Yareg val yav. You're supposed to die before you do it. I couldn't say incest, murdering someone else. Avodah Zarah. People want to be foolish. Let them be foolish. Like he says in Gemara. What's the lashon? He says, "But people are going to make a mistake and think it's a lashon." He says, "Haretzelitis yita." Whatever the meaning of it is. So So you have a choice. You could decide that the God is a stone, or you worship a stone instead of God. The problem is, it's not that you're foolish. Because once you do that, you're making God you. Instead of God creating you in the divine image, you're creating a God in your image. And that's the root of all problems. And now you made God you, then there's no room for no mitzvahs. Everything is gone. It's all about me. That's the problem. And that's really why everything is a chazal. Because you start making God into something that's like us, whether it's, like the Rambam says, how does Avodah Zarah begin? God was invisible, so they wanted something to symbolize him. So they looked at the stars. The stars are God's creations, and they have God's wisdom. So the stars. Then they made stars that are too far. So they make a building down here that reflects that star. And that became, and then ended being, you forget that it's a gazim biyad ha'chesed, that it's a axe in the hand of an axeman. So you only begin to worship the object. It becomes an end in itself. Forget about the invisible. So now, forget about there's a God that's invisible. It's the only thing is visible. So in the beginning, the first ones saw the stars, that reminded them of God. But then the next step became they saw stars, and that was it. And then it came down to all the way having, all the levels that he speaks. Basically, the idea of understanding Atzmus, one of the key things is if you really want to have bittul, you have to understand our mitzias is completely not reality. You want reality? This is reality. Reality is not built to mitzias, nimtza, This is reality. That's a reality that it has its own source. Everything in this world doesn't have a source. It has a source. It doesn't erode. It's mechuyev mitzias, is like it says here. It's kail everything. So the fact alone that Atzmus has everything and nothing defined in there is already a whole different level. But the point he really wants to lead here to is to explain that this is the root of hitkalilut, because we can bring this into our lives. That's the beauty here. That you realize Atzmus is completely beyond us, but that beyond can be brought into our existence, and it reflects in the fact that your body works together, like he says, hitkalilut. That's what he's concluding here. How is it possible that existence like ours, that's so selfish, remember, talk about selfish, and everything is all about me, 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 how is it possible that they can work together in a body? Why are the eyes and the ears and the liver and the organs all fighting with each other? Or at least not tolerating each other? Where does it come? Who's telling them all to work with each other in a point where they become mamish one? So he says that's from Atzmus. That's the chiddush here. That is hitkalilut of kelim. Toyu doesn't sense this Atzmus. Toyu in a sense senses Eir. So it likes bligvul. I don't like gvul. Tikkun senses Atzmus. And Atzmus, there's no such thing as you like bligvul, you like gvul. It's not about you. In me, everything is one. That's why there's no mitzias there at all. So really, this is coming back to this is implanted in existence. The fact that we have such a symmetry in nature and in the human body, it's a reflection only from Atzmus. Because any other level in Ishtalshlus, even the highest level of Eid, already doesn't tolerate something. Bligvul doesn't tolerate Gvul. It's Shelit. Where Bligvul Amiti, no problem, Gvul, Bligvul, everything. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then he goes, this I'm just really summarizing, but there's a fundamental chapter I thought it would be nice to read. And he brings here, he says, he brings this, which goes to Rambam, he says, so he brings here, in the parentheses, essentially, basically, just like you're believing that, just like we know that God, the Nisa Hakel, is just like we know that God B'chlal, the Atzmus, Kolos Metzias Atzmus, is. He's basically saying like this, that this Atzmus that we're talking about, Nisa Hakel, that he has everything within Shlemus, is like the general Atzmus. That Kolos Atzmus, Kolos Atzmus, the first belief, like the Rambam says, he says, is to know that there's a God. But the Rabbi Rashab is adding here that to know there's an Atzmus, not just the God. So he says, because it was a Leda, why does he say to know? Because now logic actually compels us, compels that there's a creator. From the creation, in other words, this idea that existence has a source forces us, compels us to know, prove that the source has to have no source. Because if he has a source, then back to square one. What's his source? So the fact that he can create something from nothing means that he is not like we are. But then, somebody say this, he basically, it's a chiddush here. He says, what you say that you say this is amunah, and amud hachachmas is wisdom. It's interesting. It brings both things. There's an element of faith, there's an element of knowledge. Which part is the faith?
After you have the idea, it can only be.
1 second. It says, Amunah Rishenu Mitzias Abedi Yisborach. In Chassidus, it generally says, Mamala Kalaman can be proven, is logical. In other words, to say like an artist made a painting, or a composer music, or an author of a book, that is apiseichel. To say God is beyond author, in other words, that's already amunah. But the truth is, in some places it says that even Sefer Kalam is also seichel, because the seichel that the author is not just an author also makes sense. That God is not just an author, not just the creator. But regardless, upon him, he's bringing both things here, amunah and yediyah. That's interesting. You say this is amunah, and with chochmah. So the foundation of all foundations is the amunah in Atzmus, and amud hachochm is the pillar of wisdom is the yediyah. Which I explained before. That what the Rambam says, that you have to believe and know, there's Atzmus, is to know that he's a Metzias built to Metzias Nimtza. Let me just translate it again. It means an existence that doesn't exist like we exist. Or Metzias is a Metzias, but built to Metzias Nimtza. But he exists not in a built to Metzias, a non-existential existence, essentially. In other words, you cannot say he exists, you can't say he does not exist, you say he does not exist. It's really what you're saying.
You say he exists, but not in the way we understand what Metzias is?
Yeah.
That's what you said before, right? That's
So therefore, so he's saying, what's he adding here? Remember, he said the bli gvul of Eir is bli gvul and not gvul. The bli gvul of Atzmus is not no hagdara at all, no definition. So it also includes gvul. So he's saying just like Metzias Atzmus in general is something we need to believe in and know, the same thing is that which Atzmus contains is also on a level of built in Metzias.
Why is it coined as bleak wool of Atzmus? It's a wool and bleak wool, and Atzmus is a different ballpark altogether. You coin it as bleak wool of Atzmus.
Yeah, because the bleak wool, if you really translate bleak wool can be literally translated in two ways. One is that it has no gvul, one is it has no definition.
Okay.
I think it's also important that he uses the same, because remember, not here, but another place it says the bleak wool of Eir carries the bleak wool of Atzmus into existence. In some places it says that's why Eir is bleak wool. Because it carries that, but it only carries first through bleak wool, and then it also carries the gvul and so on. And this is the amitis hashlemus. See the strong words here. Not just shlemus, not just complete. What's shlemus? Perfection? Completion? Wholeness. The amitis, the emes, the ultimate wholeness. Quintessential wholeness. Shenimtza hakel, ve'ein sham b'chinas haribah. Everything is there, but there's no such thing as a multitude or or details. Chaz v'sholom, chaz v'sholom. Here he adds two chaz v'sholoms. Before by Metzias he only said chaz v'sholom. Here he says chaz v'sholom, chaz v'sholom. I guess because ribui is already plurality. It's not just Metzias would be duality, and this is plurality, maybe. So plurality is already like one of is one thing, but a bunch of Avedas.
In the greater ribui, but the ribui.
So everything there is complete seamless unity. That's what means simple, seamless. But tachlis apshitus legamri, complete tachlis, ultimate pshitus, ultimate seamlessness. So now here's the chiddush. V'chein hu hiskalilut shemitzad hakelim shenimtzoyim madregas pratis v'kulam makablim zamazeh. And same as with the scholars that we spoke to Kalim. The Kalim, there are all kinds of details. Kelim are broken down into a multitude of definitions. The kulim mekablim zeh mezeh, and they all receive from each other. That none of them are complete without the other. And through the second and the other level, it makes it complete. So therefore, and then therefore, harikulim, they're all together when they receive from one another. Oz dafke kol achas he beginnes ken harikulim biyachad dafke shem kamzem. Oz dafke kol achas he beginnes shlemes ba'atzma. V'kulim yachad hen dover echad shalom. So only when they receive from another, only then do they become each complete in their own, and together they make one big completion. So in other words, there's two types of shlemas going on here. Each of them is not complete with the rest, and the whole thing is not complete with each of them. So both it's like so it's the ultimate unity. Because you could have had a situation like we could have had that they all lose their identity when they become one. No, they have to be in their identity, and the identity is b'shleimus when the others, and the others need you to be an individual, not separate. In other words, if for example all the organs in the body got together and said, you know what, we want unity. Everyone's going to be the eye for this week. Next week, everyone's going to be the ear. Everyone's going to be the liver. Everyone's going to be the pancreas. Everyone's going to be the heart. That's destruction. That's not unity. No, you be exactly what you are, and all the others, you need them all for you to be complete as you are, and the whole thing be complete needs all the details, and all the details make up this complete thing.
So there's individual shlemus and a general shlemus.
Kulam yachad hen dover echad shalom, and altogether, it's a paradox basically. That's why that's the question: where is it coming from? What is telling so many? Think of it, human beings. Would it be possible to imagine, in the world we live in, of course, that all human beings, even if they love each other, that they're going to be complete seamlessness without them compromising themselves? Yeah, if everybody was quiet in the eyes of the king and the king rules, fine. But if all of us can speak, and Ayin Beis saying Shabbos, we're all different. Remember, the key is thinking that we're different. If we're not different, then we're all different, and we remain different, and yet we're one. We'd say it's impossible. Either or. Either we have to be silenced, our individuality has to be silenced, or fine, you could all be individuals. Like I'm saying, I'm sure in political systems you have.
That's why people like sports, team sports.
Yeah. So either if you compromise the individuality. Remember we spoke before the 2 days in the Mekubalim. You want Atzmus? Fine, but you can't be you. You want to be you? It can't be Atzmus completely. But to be able to have diversity, ultimately diversity, and at the same time total Achdus, seems like a contradiction. In the human body, it's absolutely, that's a mamash adugma. The human body, you see that. There's not one thing in the body that's compromised in a healthy body. And if it is compromised, it's not healthy. If one part of the body dominates and suddenly, so to speak, gobbles up the others, it's not healthy at all. So the question is, where does this contradiction come from? How could it be so individualistic and so one? So Toyu does not relate to such a concept at all. Where does Tikkun get this from? So he's saying basically the Chiddush is that this comes from Atzmus. Ha'achdus. It goes on. And not only are they one, they're not just one. We learned earlier, they don't just work together. When you look at it, if someone said to you, are you a body made up of parts? Or is it one entity called the body? It's one entity. If someone did not know what we know and came to earth and saw a body, God forbid, dissected on a table, and knows and studies each part, they'd say, no way that these work together. And here they become one to the point of you can't even tell what's a head and what's a foot. That's what he said earlier. Because even the foot is needed in the head and everything, a little pain in your toe affects the whole human being.
There's medical things that people touch different parts of the foot itself. It affects the head, affects this.
Acupuncture.
Acupuncture and other things as well.
What's that? So harizeh k'may shleimus ha'atzmus sheneisa hakel b'chinas ardus pruta mamash. I mean, this is made of the chiddush. This is the yesh shleimer from the Rebbe Rashab. In other words, so this is like shleimus ha'atzmus. These combination of these two elements. It's neisa everything. Everything is there. Every component. But it's ardus pruta mamash. But it's completely one.
But can't you say it's like many different components to an electronic device? That without the device will not work if all the components are not there. I mean, each one needs the other one. but they're all individual pieces. They make up one device.
Well, you could say because we create machines similar to what we see in nature. Of course, we can simulate it. It's
Would that be a
possible.
good muscle for this? Like like each one is there, but they won't.
What's wrong with the human body? The
Yeah,
human body
absolutely.
is the best machine. I mean, any device you create is never as good as the body. He's using the body is the best example.
The symmetry is a reflection of Atzmus. The symmetry of the human body is a reflection.
But the thing, the harmony and diversity together. Yeah, a machine would be an example. When we take together
It's not only a
pieces.
machine; it's the electric current that needs every single component there, or else it wouldn't
Oh,
not
okay.
operate. Would not operate.
I don't know. He doesn't use that here. He's just using scholars of the Kalim, which one of the examples before was the human body, nature. But yeah, you could use.
The electric current would be that Ayin said.
Well, if you know quantum mechanics, I spoke last week about it. It's essentially, especially in string theory, is the idea that the whole universe is one blanket, one quilt,
Yeah.
and all the details are
Different
that.
pixels in a picture. I mean.
Yeah, they're all part. And there's one underlying force that connects it all. Yeah, these are all anything that's an example of many details working together in one symbiotic way. And here's what he says now. Here's where you see the real chiddush. The parentheses. V'yashlemer. The kashem to be in savas haramitas savas matzmus dafka k'mishkas b'geres hakesh. Remember we spoke earlier that just like Hisavos creation, mitis Hisavos is only from Atzmus. Only Atzmus can create a yesh. He says in the Geras HaKeish, the Ein Sof shemitzusim Atzmusi hu levadei b'keichi v'yecholti lahavos. Nothing can create a yesh that feels it has no source. Only hu levadei. Only he alone, Atzmus alone, because he himself has no source. That's how big the chiddush here is. And the same thing, Kamei came, Be'in Iskalos, Amitis in Iskalos, Shalehem in Atzmus Dafka. The Iskalos of the Yesh only can be from Atzmus also. Kamei came, Yeh Lo Asid, Habitl B'Mitzias Yesh, B'Bchins Ein Ei Dafka, Kamesh Kosma Kamacha. And Lo Asid Lovi, this will be revealed, the Bitl of the Mitzias Yesh, in the form of Ein Eid, like there's nothing else.
The scholars part makes.
So one second, let me just explain it. In a way, it's even a bigger chiddush because in Tanya, in the Geras HaKeish, the chiddush is that the yesh that has ein le'ila v'siba acheres is created only hulavade, only Atzmus can create a yesh like that. So now he's going a step further. Now we have a bunch of yesh in this world. So then you could say, you know what? No way they could ever work together because even if the yesh comes from Atzmus. If the yesh didn't come from Atzmus, you could argue, okay, bunch of yeshin, now get together, work on yourselves, and sublimate, and work together. Weaken your yeshins. But someone will argue, no, my yeshins comes from Atzmus. What do you mean? That's a kreach Atzmus. So he's saying that. So the kreach Atzmus now comes another kreach Atzmus, so to speak,
Even higher.
that takes the yesh, all these yeshin that each one feels they're created on their own, and says you're all one. Actually, it's hand in hand because remember in Atzmus, there is really all one. But he's saying the chiddush here is that the scholars also comes from that place. It's made a chiddush, many levels. Because if you think about it, you could argue. I mean, you could hypothetically say just to contrast, just to drive the point home. That you know what, the yesh comes from Atzmus because only the Atzmus can hulavade can create a yesh that doesn't have a source. But the scholars comes from Eir because Eir is bittul. You could argue that, but then you have a problem. Eir doesn't create ultimate unity because Eir is bli gvul and not gvul. It doesn't have total tolerance. That's the problem. That's the chiddush here. Because the pashas, that's how you would teach that the yesh comes from Atzmus and the bittul comes from Eir. That would be the way. I mean, I've always learned it that way. And together they each contribute. So the Eir teaches, like for example, the Rebbe brings in Sichos that Torah is like Eir. It teaches you the wisdom. Mitzvahs is the bitter of the Gashmi. So Torah gives direction, and the mitzvahs is where Atzmus that's revealed. It's like Yesh and Eir and the Yesh. But he's saying here deeper, he's saying that the eskalus of the Yesh, the ultimate bittul, is coming also from Atzmus, because only Atzmus can really be Neis Hakel. If it came from Eir and bittul, ultimately there'd be somewhat of a compromise of individuality. That's what it is. Because he wants here not just to have bittul, he wants to have the individuality that's bittul. So that's the case. So what do we need Eir for? The answer is because Eir ultimately, because you do need. Remember, we do need to get out of our